You think so?
Bob, why don't you get going?
All right. Should be here.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to a work session here. And tonight we're going to report on two distinct but related efforts targeted at our district's middle grade education. First, we're going to give a more detailed update on our middle school implementation plan that is aimed at opening grade 6-8 middle schools at Harriet Tubman and Roseway Heights by the fall of 2018. Second, and this is an important difference, we will describe our newly developed middle school framework, which will become our guide as we seek to achieve exemplary middle schools and middle grade education across Portland Public Schools. You have the full document in your packet, and as you can see, it's comprehensive. Both of these efforts are critical to the future of middle schools education in Portland Public Schools. Here's some additional background to set the stage. In 2015-16, Carol Smith asked district administration to do two things. One, re-envision our middle schools to improve what we offer and how we educate students in the middle grades. And second, reorganize and open two 6-8 middle schools, one at Harriet Tubman and the other, and at another location, which we have settled on as Roseway Heights. The root purpose behind these directives was to provide equitable access to strong middle school grade education throughout the system. At the time, Superintendent Smith asked for the two middle schools to open in the fall of 2017. We saw a one-year delay to give us time to develop a new middle school model, and because we had capacity issues with regard to various projects that we were engaged in across the district. On April 19th, we presented you with the middle school framework, an overview of it actually, and you unanimously approved going forward with opening the two middle schools. One of the reasons we asked for the delay was to prevent the kind of rushed effort that many feel led to problems with the conversion of Ockley Green from a K to a 6-8 middle school. I'm pleased to report that in this case, we are far ahead of that schedule and have an orderly, deliberate plan for Tubman and Roseway Heights that includes thorough community engagement, a detailed timeline, and regular checkpoints for the board. Before we get started, there are just a few other points I'd like to emphasize. The middle school framework can be considered as a template or a guide for the way we want our middle grade educations to progress in Portland Public Schools. Not all of the elements of the framework will be put in place when they open the two new middle schools. However, we are trying to operationalize the framework as much as possible and move our schools toward that framework. The histories of the two middle schools, particularly Tubman, have been turbulent, characterized by years of instability. We hope with this plan to bring stability to the students and families these schools will serve and to fulfill promises that were made to those communities. Lastly, we understand that this is not an easy task, but I'm confident in the abilities of this district to see it through. If we all work together on this, we can make great strides. And again, we are, compared to what happened with Ockley Green, ahead of schedule, but what we have learned along the way is that we still have a lot of planning to do, and the timeline is not, is still going to require us to move quickly in some areas. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to you, Chris.
Okay.
And have you talk to people about what we've got.
To call out a few things before we begin. Each board member got a compendium, kind of like an atlas of materials that have a lot of details. Everything that was handed to the board is on the back table. That represents most of the work, but it doesn't represent all of it. So there's other pieces that we have that may be called up at some other point, but certainly if questions warrant, we'll provide that information. Additionally, there's been a revision to Manual B, the communication manual. I think you received it in email, and there's a copy I see in front of all of you. Highlighted in yellow are the revisions. And then in this document, which is the memo, the board memo, I'm going to offer up a correction. So in the summary component, which lists all the materials that I sent you, the very last bullet says the 414 resolution. It should say 419. 414 is when we wrote it. 419 is when you adopted it. So that's just a technical piece. So the materials that are on the back table and what you would have received an email. On the back table is a PowerPoint. You didn't receive the PowerPoint, but that's back on the back table. the middle school planning document, and it is represented in 6 different components or 6 different compendiums. You have a cover sheet or a guide on how to use the framework. There's a timeline of key events between now and the start of school for the 2 new middle schools. There is a preliminary budget breakdown, and preliminary is what I mean is we put together estimates both on facilities and soft costs, i.e. community engagement, all the staff components of bringing these schools, or these soft components of bringing these schools online. We based it off Ockley estimates. They will be adjusted over time. And once we confirm what the feeder schools are, I expect there will be additional line items of costs added. You have Manual A, which is a merger reconfiguration manual. Fundamentally what it does is it's a step-by-step walkthrough of how to merge 2 or more buildings. You have Manual B, which is a communications plan. You have an executive view of workflow represented in a Gantt chart. You also have a list of meetings that we've convened to date with a number and type of individuals that were in attendance, and then you have the original resolution that you passed back in April. I want to call out, as we go through this, we're going to talk through where we are and where we hope to go. But there's an underlying goal that we're hoping to achieve in addition, and I'm going to call that out right now. With the merger of Ockley, we realized we didn't have a lot of systems, we didn't have a lot of precedents, we didn't have a lot of protocols in place that we could lean on to do it effectively. What we have done is we have attempted to memorialize processes in key areas, most specifically manifesting in those manuals, that should transcend the individual, like the person in my seat. So whoever comes in next should be able to pick this up and go step by step by step, date by date by date, to implement these. The work's in progress. Again, we're hoping again to memorialize it in some sort of process.
So we could hire a robot to replace you.
There's some interpretation that needs to happen.
Oh.
So I don't know if robots can do that. Maybe a cyborg.
You have to be a very, very smart robot, let's put it that way.
But anyway, so you're going to have a set of documents that, again, when we do this in the future, because we will be doing it, and with other schools, you're going to have a template. And that was missing with Ockley. All right, so why don't we jump right into it?
Can I ask a question before we start, Mr. Chairperson? So, when are we going to discuss this?
Right, today?
Today? We're in discussion, everybody's in for discussion
Yeah,
today?
for discussion.
Okay, second question I'm asking is, how do we tell what needs middle schools and what's not?
Well, I would, if possible, I would encourage the questions at the end, because a lot of those, that kind of question, for example.
No, I'm asking that as a generalized question before we begin, not a specific question. How do we determine what's in and what's not going to be in these middle school?
Okay.
That's the second question. And the third question is, what do we put in middle school when we find out that Harry Tubman is uninhabitable?
I can speak to
My
those
fourth
questions.
question is, I see school and family partnerships, but I don't see anything that structures what exactly is there. All this stuff is good, I like it, but I don't see what's there. And so that's the fourth question, so maybe we can get to those later.
Yeah.
But there's
Or,
fair warning.
as you-
Fair warning, they're
How do you
coming.
want to deal with it?
Fair warning,
How do
they're
you go
coming.
through it?
I would like to deal with it as we go through, because I
Sure.
think I'll answer some of
Yeah.
those questions. But there is a PowerPoint over there. In the PowerPoint, I call out what those 2 schools will have to start. So there's a slide in there that you can use as reference. So the outline of the presentation, there are 2 charges coming from the board. Opening 2 middle schools, and I'm going to add to that, but also we really opened 3 middle schools, so to factor in Ockley and bring Ockley up to speed. And the other charge is to envision or re-envision a new middle grades model. Also, what we're hoping to do is identify what middle grade components and experiences will occur minimally in Harriet Tubman and Roseway Heights starting in 2018 and 19, and to add, if there are pieces missing in Ockley, to bring them up. Take a deeper dive into the new middle grades framework, those 6 separate compendiums, to review the communications plan, to include process for community input, and then questions and discussion. And just to give kind of like a little background, or kind of a caveat here, what we do now with these 2 middle schools and with Ockley, as we move forward, there'll be more middle schools that will come online. There'll be those K-8s that remain, kind of adjusting. So there will be pieces in here that will look and feel different than what is currently happening in K-8s, and I just want to call that out. So the 2 charges. It was in order to meet equitable programming goals. So open 2 middle schools, Tubman and Roseway Heights, and then envision an exemplary PPS model grade, a middle grade model for students grades 4 through 10. Now this stemmed from inequity in programming between middle schools and K-8s. There was kind of a broader selection or menu of classes and offerings at a comprehensive middle than a K-8 could offer due to economy of scale. That was one of those pieces. And bringing these 2 schools online, in addition to going back and tightening up what we did with Ockley, is an attempt, our first attempt, to kind of level the playing field from that inequity that surfaced. Now, opening Tubman and Roseway Heights. This is the work that has been done to date. We have done assessments of Harriet Tubman and Roseway Heights, and what that means is a facilities assessment. We walk through them. We've assessed, is it capable of housing a middle school? And if for as much as we can estimate based on the framework and some ideas that we have, what would need to happen in the future? And I wish to call out as well that we not only did those 2, we walked through other schools that were capable of housing a middle school, and we did full assessments on that. Those artifacts we haven't included, but we have comprehensive notes and kind of conclusions from there. We walked through Sabin, King, Boise Elliott, Irving, Tubman, Humboldt, just to give you and we assessed the viability. We wanted to make sure that we had all the bases covered, and also, as the buildings said goodbye to the middle grades programs that they have, we wanted to know what facility needs they would need. So it was kind of a twofold process or a purpose. Your budget documents that I've included to you, the preliminaries related just specifically to Tubman and Roseway Heights. You have 2 columns on that budget document. One column says what we would need to do immediately and the costs associated to bring those schools online. The second column are in the near future things that we would need to do. I have omitted a 3rd column. The 3rd column is what we would need to do for long-term viability. If we do not do what's in that 3rd column, then those schools in the long term would not be viable for middle schools. And again, I can produce that at a later point if you need that. We have done an analysis and prioritization of resources across 26 departments. So just to give you an idea, there's 26 departments, 26 different timelines, resource pools that you need to align to get the work to actually happen. The workforce right now, as many of you know, is kind of spread thin, so optimization is crucial, so existing workflow doesn't get interrupted. We don't want one of our new schools not coming online because we have misaligned timelines and resource schedules. We have creation of timelines in a Gantt chart. What you have in this executive view, if I were to pull it up on the sheet, you would open up each of those tabs and there would be a gazillion things underneath that would need to get done. And then from there, you would have artifacts or forms that would need to be filled out. So it's very comprehensive. If I had laid it out here, it would have been about 28 or 30 linear feet. What it does is it memorializes and provides benchmarks and allows us to note parallel work strands, and it helps keep everything on track. Each item on the chart, again, has deeper detail and all the associated kind of artifacts that would need to be explored. The budget, preliminary, and I can't stress that it's preliminary. We based it primarily on the estimates that we put together on Ockley. So we doubled them, one for one school and doubled it just doubled it to cover both schools. The facilities is unique. That budget is called out as a separate budget document. We've done this to provide a baseline, and as we get more refined costs, i.e. how many teachers are we going to move to match this program, the moving costs would adjust accordingly. And then once the actual FT is established, then the costs modifies accordingly as well. Then finally, and I spoke to it in the beginning, develop protocols for implementation to memorialize it so that it is not person contingent. We have had a lot of turnover. We wanted to put a system in place so that when we do this in the future, they'll have a starting point. Not meaning that it's perfect, but at least it'll be comprehensive, something they can work from, and pretty straightforward. Work that lies ahead. Well, we have to hire our planning principals, and these planning principals are intended to be the actual principals for the schools as well. And that would be for Tubman and Roseway Heights. Also, we need to hire a principal for Ockley. We need to engage the community. As we've talked about the document being a seminal document, the input takes on, has a much deeper, has more depth and more complexity once we get into each specific section and we start teasing out what those sections look like, and that's where the community, both teachers and the parent community would engage. And this would only be a start. Also, we would need the board to approve the feeder patterns to engage the community. We need to know who the community is. So Tubman will be comprised of several different feeder communities. Likewise with Roseway Heights, we need to identify what those are. Or, excuse me, not identify, but approve. More work that lies ahead. We need to staff to each site. And so before staffing, we have to figure out what that staff looks like. What classes are we going to offer, what specialties, etc. We need to do school community building, and this is particularly crucial because we can't expect 4 or 5 separate communities to come together and just make it work. There needs to be some building. We need to create detailed budgets to include the needs of the feeder schools. As I said earlier, once the feeder schools come online, there's going to be budget costs associated with that. And we need to initiate facilities work to bring schools online. And that primarily will start in the summer of 2008, but there's a lot of prerequisite steps that happen as early as this summer. And let me look through my notes here. Again, to begin the work for next year, some of that work, the prerequisite steps needs to be set in or started right now. Budgets need to be tightened and made actuals. And we need to, in a genuine and not in a rushed way, engage the communities. Now, the offerings at Tubman and Roseway Heights, these are the pieces that we can ensure, and I'm putting that word in quotations, without significant cost to the district. So it's not going to be, it's not going to be millions of dollars in addition. It would just not simply, but it would take a realignment of existing resources. So basically how we do business, we would just kind of look at it differently. So some of the offerings, language arts, social studies, math, and science, which shouldn't surprise you. These would all be year-long classes. And where you see the asterisks, it includes high school level coursework. You would have world language. Also, you would have native language. Once we confirm what the feeder schools are, then that would define what that native language literacy or what that native language class would be. We would have PE, and if you note in the document that we made a recommendation or consideration to align it up to 30, I forget the House bill, but the House bill that basically outlines what level of PE needs to be offered. Health education, arts education, both visual and or performing. Counseling services. And advisory, and just a note about advisory, it doesn't necessarily mean a daily class. It could mean once a week. It's left to be defined by that school. CTE program options, and that would be like Makerspace, and ideally to have a Makerspace experience within that school. Library, technology, research, and then exploratory. 2 options for each student per year. Now, ESL, there's a few additional offerings. ESL, we want ESL to be offered, but not to replace core. And we know that it's happening in some of our schools. And ESL students must have access to at least 1 exploratory class. Special education, what we have proposed is putting a continuum in place in these schools. And a continuum means you have a least restricted class to a more restricted class, and it's all offered within school. And just to give a little background, many of the feeders have these programs. We would be moving these feeders into the school to provide a continuum. International Baccalaureate, or IB, this would be specific to Tubman. Some of the proposed feeders, or feeders that have been made public in the past as an idea, or as a recommendation, have this program. We are suggesting that that be continued in the MYP program, or the middle years program. Dual language. Again, once you identify what the feeders are, then you know what the dual language program is. From what I understand, I believe there's only one program that would immediately articulate up. Other programs, with feeders that potentially could feed that, I believe there's only one program that might, that would feed up, but again, it's contingent on identifying them to what programs, what languages we would create the language. And then this is a new piece, and we're proposing to provide interventions in math and literacy for students in need of Tier 2 or Tier 3 interventions. So that means that kids that are not operating a benchmark for both math and or reading, we suggest providing those interventions. We are not defining what those interventions are. Those could be individual staff members teaching classes at the various levels, or it could be a set of materials. It is left to be decided in deeper collaboration with that community. Let's see if I got everything. Oh, and just to note, any dual languages that we feed up to this middle school eventually would have to feed up to a high school. So it's not just this middle school, it's an articulation program, or articulation plan that goes up to that high school. Now, the other charge, envisioning exemplary middle grades program. So what I just previously did is talk about the charge of bringing those two middle schools online. From the beginning, some of these charges we've tended to conflate them together, but they have been two separate charges, but not exclusive of one another. They lean into each other heavily. So back in 2015, when Superintendent Smith came to us, she said, I want these schools brought online, but I also want you to rethink what middle school programming looks like. And not necessarily like teaching, like whether to teach social studies or not, that's really not the question, but how we are doing things and what sort of things might you find in there. So what we did is we compiled the research, and we went probably about as far back as 30 years. We took everything that was out there. And it's pretty extensive, and we leaned heavily into the local expertise at PSU. We combed through it, crosswalked it, analyzed it, inventoried what we were doing here at PPS, questioned and validated that alignment, and ultimately synthesized it into a collection of practices, ideas, references, according to 6 categories that surfaced generally in all the pieces of research that we came across. What these documents represent, I think, is the 3rd or 4th iteration, or the culling, or the smithing of it. We extensively shot this framework and its underpinnings, and we have a reference document with, input sessions. And the purpose was to refine that doc and to prepare for a deeper, closer to the practitioner look, and also to build in like a stage 2 community engagement. This was considered stage 1. It was not intended to be exhaustive, but foundational. What I have is we have a plan in stage 2 to convene committees, and would be by each of these respective areas. And these committees would convene on each area of review, brainstorm and recommend and frame out what that looks like. The next slide speaks a little bit more to it, and then I'll speak to a specific example. So the key steps on the middle grade, the key next steps on middle grade programming. We need to create an implementation plan, complete a curriculum program review of all areas in the framework. So what that means is each area, so if you look at MTSS, or if you look at social studies, or if you look at mindfulness, I mean, these are all pieces on there. Again, doesn't mean you get them all, but we come together on them. We get cross-curriculum, cross-district, cross-community representation on these committees, and they look at what we put down as kind of, each section opens with a kind of a foundational paragraph and then some considerations that are bulleted. They use that as the foundation or the starting point for the discussion, and then they frame it out to a task. This is what we want it to look like. A concrete example I can give, and I elaborated on a little bit at the last meeting, is like social studies. So some of the pieces, some of the research, and one of them came from the City Club, said that we need to have civics engagement as a component. Currently, it doesn't exist in our social studies program, not to any serious extent, according to their assessment. Also, best practices says kids in social studies need to be active. They need to practice what they're learning. So that group would convene around that. They would see that civics engagement is a component. They would define maybe what that looks like. Is it an 8th grade capstone? Is it a 6th, 7th, and 8th grade experience, or is it something that is infused throughout the curriculum? They would define that in that committee work. So these committees convene, they define what the exemplary practice is, taking note of the considerations. So the next steps with that is to solicit informed committee membership for each task. It's intended to have broad teacher representation, administration, and parent community, and community partners. Brainstorm and craft the program components. Again, what this isn't is a curriculum adoption committee. That's different. This would be taking the existing adoption and calling out these pieces. And then create evaluation rubrics against those program elements, so that once we know that this is what optimal social studies look like, this is what optimal MTSS looks like, we can go into buildings and say, all right, according to the continuum, this is where you're at. And that's where you start to build your implementation plan. So when this work begins, and this is where I see there's an opportunity for the board, as these committees convene and they come up with recommendations and suggestions, some of them will have costs associated with it. Like, for example, with counseling. We recommend that, yes, counseling should continue, but also there's a recommendation in the research says that you should staff counselors at the nationally recognized model, in particular at middle school, a very vulnerable time. So if you were to do that, that would be an additional cost. So once that committee comes together, they frame it out, and if these pieces have costs, it would be put before the board. And then you might have several options before you which you could prioritize and say, you know, we can't do them all, but we can do these things to start. So that would be a piece in the future where the board would get very direct input and be able to prioritize things to add or things not to add. Community engagement plan. And I wish to give acknowledgement to our Harry and David. They have come on board and they've kind of added dimension where we've not had it before. So the goal is to ensure stakeholders have opportunities to provide meaningful input and feel a sense of ownership of this. And who? That would be teachers, administrators, school, district staff, family, students, any affected schools, and community organizations, others. To note, those communities need to be identified first. And then how? A series of town hall listening sessions with the middle school implementation team meetings will be led by external facilitators. We'll hire that out. And our goal ultimately is to have community buy-in. All stakeholders should feel some level of ownership, and we don't want it to feel top-down. We've already had some conversation with teachers and community members. It's by no means is it exhaustive, but it's now time to reach out to these specific groups in a deeper way. And we would do extensive outreach to these communities, specifically community of color, underrepresented and historically marginalized, and we would find the best way to connect with them. Engagement continued. So what we want to do is we want to open up and give multiple venues for that community engagement or that community input. And so one piece would be online comments. We would maintain a website that includes a place for comments. Follow-up, results from the listening sessions analyzed, reported out to stakeholders. We heard that loud and clear. What happens when they listen? Did you do anything with it? Well, we would expect to have those comments analyzed and report back on them, either publicly or to the board. We also expect the media to have some interest along the way, so we're going to have media engagement sessions open to them, every effort to provide accurate and balanced information. And we're going to work with communications to ensure that it's accurate and balanced. And then for board updates, you're going to have regular updates on the listening sessions and other pieces like progress, work to date, they'll be provided to you. And I think you have the latitude to decide how often and on what particular items. I think we're prepared to do quarterly, but we could do something most certainly with higher levels of frequency. The communications plan, now just a different community engagement plan, communications plan. The goal is to ensure all stakeholders are kept informed and up to date on progress. There's a lot of moving pieces, and again, I referenced 26 different departments. They're going to need to constantly be aligned and calibrated with one another. You're going to want updates on that. How? Regular progress reports that briefly detail the latest developments, progress to date, what's coming up, how to get involved, or anything else that comes up as a need, because we intend to have a very kind of open process of gathering information. Who? It'll be emailed in easy-to-read format to the PPS board. Not that you're not sophisticated enough to take complexity. Teachers and administrators, school and district staff, PAT, PAPSA, PFSP, SEIU, and other associations, organizations, and then central office admin. Communication will take the lead in ensuring that everyone is kept up to date on the middle school reorganization. The main communication tool will be emailed progress reports that allow you kind of see what the latest developments are. And the underlying goal is to ensure that people aren't caught off guard by the process as we move forward. A lot of schools are out there, a lot of people are involved. We want to make sure that everything stays in sync. And by devoting time and attention to community engagement and follow-up communication, we hope to assure a high level of transparency. Now, that is the snapshot of it. Now, I would like to open up to the board for questions and discussions. You have a tome of information. I would expect that there will be additional pieces that you will need information on, other than what this platform or this venue will provide for you. But I will do my best to answer those questions and to get those answers over to get you the respective information you need.
No, we just asked for questions. So
I'm waiting for Kurt.
we might have to do that for a while.
Beg your pardon.
Here you go.
Just on this section or on another part?
So, you know, what we could do, if you wanted to, the list of materials are on the board memo. We could go.
I can do questions on that. I've got questions on that.
Sure.
Questions on that. On the course offering, I'm trying to figure out which ones are there. So if I go through the offerings, I see PE health, art. Is that art include music?
And/or.
So what art is going to be in? So we just talked about Tubman, and then is it the same for the other one?
Yes.
Okay, so let's just talk about Tubman. What art is in Tubman specifically? I'm a kid in Tubman, what art can I take next year?
Okay. So the art that you get would be defined by the course catalog. So there would be a baseline of art that is already defined within the course catalog. With the exploratories, let's say when we engage that community, there is a theme of arts exploration that surfaces. The exploratories could add to that list or to that stack of offerings.
Who's putting in the exploratories? Now, I'm going to ask questions that I think may be hard, because that's how we work.
Fair enough, yeah.
So who's putting in that? Who decides what? Okay, let's go back to the first part. The art that is there is what?
Okay, Kevin, would you be able to refresh my memory?
In other words, do we have
What's in the
art,
report?
and for how many of the kids? How many kids are we estimating in this school? 600?
We have, so the range for optimal comprehensive middle school is between 400 and 800. We said the optimal range is between, like 550 to 650. That's
Okay,
it.
let's just say 600, just so we can talk. That's a way to talk. So if you got 600 kids, and you got some art programming, now is that only through the exploratory? Or is there art programming, period? Does every kid have an art, or every kid takes an exploratory?
So Kevin, could you speak to the course catalog?
Sure. Art would definitely fall inside what I believe we're defining as the exploratory.
Okay, so what art is in the exploratory?
So we have the set of offerings that the district currently has. You got music, you have visual arts, in some cases you have some performing arts other than music. So you have that menu.
Okay,
But we're not-
there's a menu, so what's going to actually be there? So for instance, are we going to have at Tubman Middle School with 600 kids, a band? 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, band.
So that is to be decided.
So are we going to have an art teacher, one art teacher, or 2 art teachers?
So,
They teach actual, not talking visual arts.
so let me kind of back up. What we intend to do is engage that community to find out what exactly they're interested in having.
So we're going to listen to people who aren't interested in having music in our schools? I guess, we listen to them, but are they going to go forward and have a lot of influence to stop having music in our schools?
If I may,
You want, maybe he could come up here?
Yeah, come on up.
Kevin, why don't you?
I mean, I don't
let folks know who you
have,
are.
I have a little different take on the community. I'm not sure how many people in that community are educational experts or will take the time. So if we're going to say it's up to the community whether we have a band in the school, that, I got a question now. I don't think it's up to the community to decide what we have in our schools. It's up to the community to add things, and it's up to the community to favor things, but there are certain things. We're not going to let the community decide we're not going to have social studies, right?
so
Are we going to let the community decide we're not going to have a band, or we're not going to have music programs, or we're not going to have a librarian, or we're not going
Let's
to
see
have
if we
an
can
art?
tag team
Yeah,
the
okay.
question.
So in context of the conversations that have happened through this planning.
Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yes, sorry. Kevin Crotchett, I'm principal of Jackson Middle School and have been involved in this work.
And got a lot of neat stuff on that there.
Thank you. So directly to the question of would it be band or would it be orchestra? Would it be choir or would it be drama? Would it be visual arts or would it be, right? So
Thank you.
we have incredible.
Absolutely,
Absolutely.
are right on the question.
Right.
There's the question.
In many ways, is that would be decided. Is that decided today? No. Would that be decided? Of course, we need to decide that once we know the community and we know where we're feeding, right? What does that high school have to offer, right? We don't want to offer orchestra if they have band. We don't want to offer visual arts if they have dance. So where is that alignment? As well as what are our feeder schools bringing in, as well as what does our community say?
Haven't we?
So all of those
haven't we-
questions.
We haven't analyzed that yet, then, is that what you're telling me?
That's next
So,
year.
We don't know what's that, this is going to feed into who? This school will feed into,
Tubman will feed Grant.
will feed to Grant. Tubman will feed to Grant. So we don't know what's in Grant now?
so,
Welcome to the school board.
all right, so,
In which case, and how the school board works is like this. Some people ask questions that they really want to know, and then some people make funny faces at those people for asking questions that they really want to know. Just so you know
I
what
have an
you're doing,
answer
you're
for you.
here. I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about my colleagues who are kind of getting a little tired of.
so Steve, let me go back to the committee process. It's not a free-for-all. There are parameters to it, of which Kevin started naming some of them. What is the programs that are existing at the feeders? We haven't identified, or excuse me, we haven't confirmed them. And then ultimately where these kids land, whether it's just Grant or if it's another high school, what programs do they have? Those are the parameters or the guides for this discussion. We also want to measure what the interest is. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I also add that this is also, I mean, this is the annual work as well of a sitting principal, right? I mean, right, so once a program gets established, right, you're still constantly analyzing what do we have, what don't we have, what do we need, what do we need, constantly, right, thinking about that. So to say that we could answer those questions right here and now,
You're not ready.
it doesn't make sense.
Well, it does make sense to some degree, I think, in that I think one of the community questions, we're going to talk about the community, is this a bait and switch deal? Here's all these things out here that we're saying, hey, you could have this, and you could have this, and you can have this. But when it ends up, we don't have all those things necessarily. And we don't have them all, we've already said that, but we don't have a lot of them. and we end up shortchanged according to what we end up offering. Even though the community, if I went out in the community and tell the community to dance, do you want band in your school? They say, oh yeah, sure. Do you want art? Oh yeah. Do you want a counselor? Yeah. Do you want a librarian? Yeah. Do you want all of these things? We could do the whole list, and they would come up with the list. I'm just trying to get us, so when we go out to the community, we're able to say, and we're able to say, we're going to have these strong programs, and here's some things we're really going to have. And then on these things, maybe we're going to talk about, do we want an orchestra or a band? But it's not, do we not want a band or not want a music program in a middle school? If we're going to say that that's the case, then we got to question going to the middle schools the way we're going to them anyhow. Maybe we need to go to a 7th and 8th grade middle school instead of 6th, 7th, and 8th
So,
grade.
Steve, the board has the right to be prescriptive in this.
Well, yeah, but
So
it's
what
not
we're
up
saying-
to us.
But what I'm simply telling you is, when we come together, there are going to be parameters, and not going to be a free-for-all, but the discussion, we feel that the discussion needs to be had with that community as to what their interests are. It's not a guarantee that they don't have orchestra, it's not a guarantee they don't have band. A few people at this meeting say we don't want it. I mean, we have not done the analysis, we have not confirmed the feeders, and through the entire pathway. So deciding what they are is a bit premature.
What is a guarantee? Is the art?
Yeah,
Right?
Of some sort.
That's
of
what
some sort.
Of some sort.
Yes. Let's
Could
just-
be one half-time art class, so visual arts and no music.
But, you know,
Could be that.
it's also within
Yeah,
the
sure.
board's latitude to add additional, like, let's say they decide they wanted some science theme-based exploratories. To add a full complement, should that building be able to house it? Like, there's not limitations to this at all. What I'm simply saying is, once we confirm what those feeders are, and then we know what variables are going into it, that defines what the subsequent conversation is. Again, you need to know what's being offered in those elementaries and what's going to be offered at those high schools to complete this conversation.
Yeah, but you're going to be in Paraguay.
Yes.
Who are we completing that conversation with? Superintendent's down, you're gone, I'm gone, Curler's gone. Who are we completing that conversation with?
So,
I'm not
sir-
sure the people who are left, and that I'm trusting to complete that conversation.
So let me tell you about
Well,
what I
you
spoke
should
to.
run for reelection.
Yeah, that's right.
What I spoke to earlier is we wanted to memorialize this so that it's not contingent on me. So in our manuals, we have one that I'm working on right now, has to do with personnel, okay? How to do this piece. But also there's another one that has to do with communication. These pieces, and we're hearing it as a clear piece, to get called out and articulated. So again, that's not contingent on both of us. If someone can pick it up and say, all right, this is what we need to do, step by step by
Well,
step,
I'd like to get it in black and white,
not in color.
so the people who say I can get behind this middle school know what's going to be there. That's all I'm saying, and I'm just saying, without it being laid out, that we're going to have some music, or we're going to have some art, or we're going to have drama, or we're going to have some things that are available, then all those things could go flying out the window and change next week for all we care.
And I appreciate that. I think we should enter this conversation again once the feeders are confirmed, and the pathways are confirmed. And then I can tell you what pieces are out there with the analysis from all of those moving pieces.
So do you have a timeline on everything that, I missed that,
There's
of
a
when
lot
the
of time.
peers will be decided, and then how long the community engagement and the work with the teachers, so how is this all gonna roll out so that you guys can kind of benchmark about this?
As far as the feeders, that's the conversation we're ongoing right now, and what we share with DBRAC
Yeah.
and the timeline that we work out with them is really critical. Actually, when we started this process, I thought that we would have a considerable amount more time than it appears that we will. So we're going to be meeting with DBRAC tomorrow to have a conversation about how quickly can we, what kind of recommendations can we get, and how quickly can we get them on what the future schools should be. But that's a conversation that I need to have with DBRAC tomorrow.
When, Bob, do you think they would have what I'm asking?
Like what?
What's actually?
Like a very black and white
What
list?
classes are going to be in this school, what opportunities we will have in this school for kids, what, I've got to what engaging activities.
So for the exploratories, right?
Well, it's not just exploratory, but we can add any sports, how about putting in that, I mean, are we gonna do, is it gonna be bare bones, is it gonna be a real, I mean, there's there's about 6 things you wanna look at carefully for middle schools, which I wrote down here. And as I go through and check them off, I can't see them all checked off.
Okay.
That's,
So I can give you
which
the
I'll
timeline.
talk about it later.
The timeline lines up with existing district processes. So our goal would be to have all of these in draft form by November 1st, like what the FTE of those buildings look like, according to what we were able to offer, of which a component is those exploratories. From that point forward, it follows into the district process of merging schools and, working through it. But that would be the rough timeline. The committee to explore the exploratories would be convened, or excuse me, the constellation of folks would be brought together. It's hopefully starting soon. Possibly meet in the summer, but by the latest, September. And they would convene all the way through till November to give some ideas out on this. Now, again, it's not static. It's not like whatever they recommend isn't the be-all and end-all in what will be, but it's what we can roll forward next year. So, I mean, that's the best timeline I can give you. But the key, the catalyst is we need to identify what those fears are in order to kind of make those decisions, those subsequent decisions.
Chris?
Yes.
So there are a lot of really great things in here, a lot of great classes, a lot of opportunities, a steep list, a lot of things that we want for all of our kids. How much of that is going to be contingent on the amount of money that we have to work with? In other words, we're continuing to see cuts this year. We don't know about next year or the year after, but we continue to cut. I mean, I don't want the public to think we're going to be providing all these things when we just plain don't have the money for it.
Okay. So I think I can answer that
The flip side of the coin.
in 2 parts. The list of things we presented, we believe we can do, and I'm using it very loosely, cost neutral, basically by re-evaluating how we use our existing resources and redeploying them that way. Now, subsequent adds, some of it is just going to be practice. If you have a civics engagement piece, there may not be a cost associated with it. However, if you add an additional counselor, yes, there will be. So as these committees convene and they form out what each component looks like, there's going to be a cost out associated with it. So that would be part of the presentation to the board. This is what we say counseling should look like. It should have this sort of college experience. It should have this number of counselors. Here's the budget attached to it. Likewise, if we want experiential or exploratory math, that math takes space. This is what we would need to do in terms of furniture or classroom layout. Here's the associated cost. So that would be part and parcel of what we would present for.
We had the same thing happen when we did high school system design and rolled out the core curriculum and everybody was all excited. And then boom, we went into a huge recession, cut $40 million out of the budget, and there just wasn't no money for a lot of the things that we wanted to do. And it's not that I think this is a great program. I'm hoping that we'll continue to get more funding, but I think we have to include a disclaimer in everything that we do that this is all contingent on funding.
And it's a strategic
Oh.
vision, like high school redesign takes.
Exactly.
You're still working with high school redesign and implementing components. It's going to take multiple years, not only to bring these schools up to whatever the exemplary all 360 model is, but additional schools too. But I think through communication plan that will evolve, through the process of the normal budgeting process, you'll have a series of choices to make every year as a budget, which these are the pieces we want to move forward or we want to advance or elevate within the middle school program. And then, okay.
Go ahead. I didn't have a question.
So, but
Let me interject here a second. Again, there are two things going on here, and they are basically connected in a very important way. One of them is what we expect to roll out in 18-19, and that is cost neutral essentially for what we have now. The other is the exemplary that we would work against. Some of the things that are exemplary would not cost. Some of the things that are exemplary would cost. What we tried to do in this is not to include those items that would cost additional because we did not want to obligate the board for money that we weren't sure that they could put up. That said, this document and the ongoing work using the template will ask the question, are our resources district-wide being spent appropriately? Should we spend more on the middle schools and take from other areas? That's an important question that will ultimately, this document can be used for over time. But again, the implementation plan as opposed to the template, the implementation plan is intended to be cost neutral.
And I think that's, I understand all that, Bob, I totally. But I get concerned when we sit in a meeting like this and talk about all the great things. And then we hear that 2 years from now and there's no money to implement some of those things. The exemplary piece is lost on people. And they think that we're going to have everything and then we can't provide it and it causes a lot of distress in the community.
Right.
And that was
I
the
just
struggle.
we have to remind people over and over again that this is the goal, that it's going to take us time to get there and it's dependent on funding.
That was the struggle that Carol had, to be honest with you, because she wanted us to rethink the model, but didn't want to obligate us. And that's why they somewhat got conflated, and we had to kind of keep them separate.
So, is there, where is that exemplary model? That includes sports and, everything that we want in middle school. How, what's that? That's why you're there. But, what we've learned from the research as to here are the components of an exemplary model, and then here are kind of what we're planning here as at the beginning, and then know where we want to move to. How do we lay that all out really good?
I think we started here with just a few kind of classes, because I understood that to be a concern. We can come back and provide what it looks like, and we look from the document. We have a very comprehensive middle school athletics program. That would not change. These schools would not be an exception to that. So that expectation would carry over. So we can flesh that out, kind of give a more 360 view as opposed to just these two docs,
Yeah.
or these two slides here.
Yeah.
Okay. I think there were other questions, but I got lost on the first one.
Yeah.
No, that's part I had other ones. I would, okay, nobody else asked. I got a checklist.
Go for it.
Here's 6 things that I think are basic to being in a good middle school. Can we just check them off?
So is this a
If we
question
check them
or
off,
is
I have this checklist, okay, which I wrote out.
So let me copy that.
Off the top, well, I don't care. It's up to you, I just give you an answer. 1, that we will have a solid schedule of subjects. In other words, good solid schedule, we all know that. That's one. What the subjects are, we know what they are when we get them. The second one, and almost the most important one, are that we have engaging activities in classes, which will include things like sports, art, CTE, library, PE, full PE, right now we're kind of PE, right? Foreign languages, technology, other things that are interesting and fun for kids in that grade level, so they want to come to school, which most kids, if you wake them up in the morning, most kids don't want to come to school when they're 13. But if they have good stuff to look forward to, then they want to come to school. That's how the system works. I don't care if people can say it, but it doesn't get enough play. The third thing is that you have this kind of radical principal who is not into
So radical.
yes, not into constructs of how you work. They're not asking their teachers for lesson plans. They're not saying this is how you teach within certain parameters, teach within these parameters. They're more able to free flow with, and so you don't restrict your best teachers. That's the thing. That's if you go out. There we go. I made it again. Going out to Alisada, lead principal out there. Why is he principal of the year, and why is Alisada one of the national finest middle schools supposedly in the country? It's top 13 middle schools or something in 4 areas in the country. And part of it is that guy's personality. In fact, a huge amount of it is his personality. And if you jump back, go to then the fourth, is that you get solid teachers and then you give them room to move. What he talks about out there is And this is what Chris Reiser, who's a very good teacher, talked about at our board meeting, is that teachers have the room to move. We're not restricting them in to these situations, these educational situations. You have to teach this way, you've got to have the Common Core. We still do that in our schools. And it's very, very restricting and very damaging in the middle grades when people go that way. And 5 is wraparound services are solid, which if that includes the community organizations who are helping, includes ESL, special ed, tag, and all those type of, I mean, put them all, but those are solid, and we've thought through what we have there. And the 6th one is that we have clear expectations and disciplinary procedures that they've agreed on, that they've got straight. A lot of the problem that we're having in many of our schools is they never got the disciplinary procedure straight. They don't know what happened. Where are we going? Okay, we're not going to do this. It's different for this kid. They're not following through. They're not. I mean, it's a hubbub in many of our schools, and they need to have it straight. Now, if that includes mindfulness or PBIS or whatever it includes, it should be clear what the procedures and the expectations are. We're having, for instance, I talked to a teacher at one of our high schools. Kids running around the halls doing stuff. If you just look at the rape culture letter that I have a very good friend who taught for 30 years, and that showed up in the newspaper. And he turned to me and said, one of the things is that guy ought to get out in the hall more. Bingo, what are your expectations? Do you just let the hallway go, or do you not? I mean, those things need to be clear. That's the 6 things that I think that we need to be looking at in order to make sure that this middle school and both of these do work. Thanks, I have some other questions too, but not really.
Can I share anything about, or thinking of strategic plans for looking at behavior and academics in a framework?
Yeah, so outside of the middle school, like broader district?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, this is a broad topic, I'm going to try to keep it succinct. So we have a lot of different groups working on similar things that sometimes come into conflict with one another because doing the same work kind of get in each other's way. So there has been a sincere effort to corral, synthesize, and bring those efforts into confluence under like a structured tiered level of support. We call it MTSS, we call it RTI. So there is a district.
And PBIS fits in there.
PBIS. So we have brought all those resources together, we synthesize them, and we're doing all the pieces to make it kind of like centrally supported.
And you and I talked about this before, is that where you have these broader programs like PBIS, which is a good program, and, Restorative Justice, it's a good program, but they're not set up to outline how your system works. They're set up to be complementary to that outline. And so when I talk about the expectations and the disciplinary procedures being clear, I'm not talking about putting a lot of things in there. I'm talking about that you have that clear in these things. What role does PBIS play in your disciplinary? It's not the disciplinary procedure itself, how things work. And that's one thing. I had a couple other things here.
What do you mean? Yeah, no, PBIS is the procedure. It is exactly the framework. And what I've been talking about for 2 years, and we're actually working towards that, is to establish a solid multi-tiered support system that looks at both that consolidates and is one academics and PBIS together, not as 2 separate systems. And that PBIS gives the framework, it is the framework for discipline, slightly different at each school because each school will make their own kind of behavioral expectations and consequences and expectations to that culture of that community, but there's a basic framework of it. And there are plans to do some kind of taking a bigger scan of what we have available now and then how to move forward. And I'm recommending that we work with Oregon RTI, who's done this for half the districts in the state, of creating that system district-wide. Those systems, those districts that have done that have seen an increase of literacy in math. I mean, just really shot up across all subgroups of kids. So when we look to having this basic framework, then we could put all of those actions in place. So that's what I'm excited. I think we really are talking about how we move ahead in that. And within that, then, all of this stuff really falls into place because those frameworks look at what you have as the basic program for all, and then what you offer for some that need extra support across whether it be behavior or academics, and what you have for few. So those kids that might need special education services or even tag services, because there's few that might need a more intensive setting for tag. So that kind of a framework really encompasses all of our learners at each level. So I think we're really have some serious plans into how we build and create that system. And I think that's just going to help tie everything together.
And it is a framework, right, but it doesn't tell you what happens when the kid
Yes, it does.
does,
It absolutely does.
calls the teacher the F word.
It actually does. Those are
Says
all
that a
laid
kid
out.
calls the teacher an F word, what you do?
Yep, it's
Please
actually all
send me that
spelled
material
out.
where it says about the F word.
You know what, it's up to the school. There are systems, I'm sure, that have that.
Exactly what
But
I'm
it
saying,
is-
it's up
yeah.
to the school
Well-
in the end, what takes place, what consequences there are, how you are going to handle it and so
But
forth.
there is a structure, that is not
There's a-
my expertise. My colleagues could come in and tell it to you, but
If I could give a shout
there
out.
are
to this.
experts.
So what we run into in the district is we have everybody working hard and doing
Yep.
what they think is the right thing, but we have no standard to measure it against. And so as we talk about this, restorative justice, MPSS, RTI, all those pieces, we need to define what that standard is and put all those pieces in place so that we don't have that wide levels of variance or improper implementation, which we do in some areas.
And I would add that, you know, from my vantage point, the PBIS specifically is more along the line of the behavioral side as opposed to the academic side that is the full complement. And we've been working to implement the PBIS among the errors that have been made in doing, and which is part of the climate plan that schools are supposed to work on and develop. And and we're in varied states of how that has been implemented around the district. Those schools that focused on that at the very beginning of the year and pushed everything else aside pretty well have it implemented. Then there are some schools that didn't do that, and then as a result, they're the ones that end up struggling a bit. And Kevin, am I getting that pretty accurate?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely to what you're saying, I understand what you're saying, especially in those, like you said, the first couple days, start of the school year, makes a huge difference whether than, as opposed to working on it in the middle or towards the end.
And one of the things that I would say, and instructions that I would leave, and I'm sure that Antonio's already locked onto this because we've talked about it a good bit, and we've tracked the stage of the implementation of PBIS. We have that information, but I think that what we didn't do in the first year is we didn't make it really clear to principals that they really had to get that implemented right up front. You know, and start before school. That's part of what would be done in the summer, or in my recommendation would be as part of the budget as we develop it along, that the new staffs of these schools have extra time at the beginning of the year and maybe at the end of the first year so that they can develop programs like how they would develop their specific rules for their specific schools against the backdrop of PBIS and ultimately against the entire complement of academics as well. But these new schools will need a little extra time for the staffs to develop their climate plans.
And we built that into the budget. By the way, you have a kind of an executive view of it, but I could break it down by types of activities, extended hours for types of teachers, etc.
Okay, still going over here, I guess. Other
Yeah,
comments?
let's just see if anybody else wants to. Are there any other questions or comments?
Well, yeah, I have just a couple of things. So I was looking really with the lens of, I think there was a little, maybe one of the talked about culturally responsive instruction and wondering if there's some just kind of broad principles that encompasses all, and including UDL, Universal Design for Learning for kids with different learning needs. And is this then mapped onto grade level standards, or where is that?
So I'm thinking I'm understanding. So when we unpack and give substance to this, would they be crosswalked or would they manifest within the grade level standard? Yeah, you would see that, so.
It's just, we're not there yet.
No, this is a much more executive view. That happens after the committee works flesh it out.
Okay.
And then curriculum instruction go to work to actualize it in many cases.
And I would just add that if you've got specific comments that you would like to see us take a look at for the document, that is still it's a working document, and we'd love to have those comments. This is, what she's got here is part of the framework piece is what I'm talking about, because we are building that as a backdrop against which to measure our progress toward reaching a better level of middle school. And that's what she's got some writing on. So.
Yeah, so I mean, if we're kind of building a philosophy, that philosophy inclusive of, UDL principles, culturally responsive, how we, if it's just important, we can find those. And somebody else could ask some questions now.
Halima, you got what's on your mind?
Nothing, I'm listening, I'm
Okay.
taking it in. I have a question on.
Paul?
The one comment I would have, Chris, is that I think it is a real mistake to set student demand as a preliminary requirement for offering a beginning class. The district has done this before. They did it when the arts tax came in.
What does that mean, I'm sorry?
Oh, I'm sorry, what does what mean?
So what you just said, student demand as a pre.
Oh, you mentioned that. Though in your list of things that a school would look at in order to decide whether or not there was going to be
For
a
like
class.
this?
Oh, so
Yeah.
community interest.
Community
yes.
interest.
Yeah.
What the district has sometimes done in the past, did it when the arts tax came in. It's a list of my daughter's school was more than a dozen different possible arts classes that they could offer. And of course, they didn't get more than 6 kids taking any of those. So that's one extreme example. You end up just offering the lowest common denominator. But also, these things take time to build interest, and we really need to be making if we're going to look at seriously offering something we think is going to be of value, we need to commit to a number of years to build up interest.
I would agree.
And I think the word is used too much, but I think what Steve is talking about here is aspirational goals for what these classes should be. And ideally, we need to make a commitment to fund them for several years, not fund them, not go with them if we can't make that commitment, and see what kind of interest we can build.
I think how I interpret what you're saying is walking that fine line with being prescriptive and hearing community voice. And in Portland,
Yeah.
you know that community voice is amplified.
Right.
And
I'm not saying it's easy.
yeah, so but you do need to hear, but
Yeah.
you don't let it define. So there's got to be some process and some guidelines.
I think that's a lovely way to put it. Exactly. Yeah.
I thought I would get lots of questions
We have
on the
a
budget.
lot, quite a lot. Not many more. So you running the place, Amy?
We have a void? No?
Thank you.
You mentioned all your exploratories in here. There are 9 weeks exploratories that are locked in, I assume. It says exploratory, 2 options for each student per year. Sometimes exploratories can be 9 weeks. have to be.
Like a wheel?
Whatever, depending on the video, right? That's, I'm just saying, that's not locked in, right?
No.
One of the things I missed was the equity piece, which fits in under the teachers and also fits in under the wraparound. We haven't really done a very good job of doing equity within our grade schools and middle schools. We're way better than high schools. And I think we need to think more about that down the line. How do we bring equity into these schools? For instance, the website that we have that I pushed to get, again, some people who wanted to cut it, that particular website allows us, should be used to allow us to increase the whole object of it is to allow us to increase
The multicultural
yeah,
heritage.
multicultural, but also we have 104 languages, and so it allows us to get at some of those pieces that you can't get out of textbooks, or you can't make necessarily, you can make, like we're doing the ethnic studies in the high school, and that is excellent, what we're doing. Maybe we need to have an ethnic studies class in the middle school, I don't know, but we certainly need to have a plan for what is it that we are doing, how are we bringing equity into the middle school and theoretically we should have the same time on how we're bringing it in. And it's not the same for children as it is for adults. It's not courageous conversations for children, though that should be part of it. But it's also, what are we doing to make sure that children see people in their history that are kind of similar backgrounds and stuff. And so that's a comment. It talked about DLI in here. Is there a DLI program going to be at Tubman?
So depending on what feeders we confirm. So if the feeder has a DLI program, yes.
Then we bring it forward.
Yes.
Okay. Are there any in the feeders that we're suggesting right now?
Yeah,
There are some. Which ones?
Would you shake your head yes back there?
Which one is it? Which one?
Maybe Chinese immersion, which is that,
Mandarin and Canadian.
Yep.
Is there any others?
but it won't be there and for about 3 more years because it's a growing program. It's only at 3rd grade.
Is there any other ones, Judy?
Not under consideration for Tubman, most likely, at this time.
Is there any, well, that's a different question. Is there ones, are there any more in the elementary schools that we think are going to probably feed to Tubman?
No.
Just that.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And another thing is, I think we need to think about having daily PE in middle schools. I think you go across the country, you'll find out it's a best practice. But which all these people seem to like best practices, so hey, that's a best practice, I'm sure. But daily PE gives that outlet. And I mean, I've taught middle schools for years and years and years and years and years. And I've taught where you had good PE teachers and where you had poor PE teachers, or where they didn't have PE all the time, and there was a whale of a difference in your math class or your English class, whether or not you had PE in that school.
So there's a couple things with that. On the document, there's a recommendation to be in alignment with the House bill, which says to increase the number of PE minutes.
Which I guess in the end we decide how we're aligning, because right now we're cutting PE across the
Right, so
district.
it would be a cost, but the other consideration is if you do decide to increase PE, you need to have that space, that gym space.
Well, the
to
PE
accommodate.
would, yeah, but the PE wouldn't be, yes, no, you're, yeah,
Yeah,
it's a very good point. I was just saying, PE is not an extra cost just to have PE. If you had all the space already, then there's no extra cost to add PE, because it's just kids are in PE instead of whatever else they're in PE.
So
I mean, they gotta be someplace.
that would be a consideration for.
All
the board, you know.
these things, there's not really much extra cost to any of them aren't, and because there's no staffing extra cost. Because you have kids there instead of here. I mean, you got kids in a class all day long, there's no blank classes, right?
Unless you added those as extra.
But even if you had them,
options.
actually, you'd still have the kids in them, so you could cut back on the other people and only work 2/3 of the day. Maybe our teachers only work 2/3 of the day, which I did for 10 years at middle school where I worked 2/3 of the day. And so 1/3 of it was somebody was doing music probably, because they had a full music program. And the last comment that I have is, One of the things that I think brings about some problems is overdoing the data, the research base, the testing and stuff, especially in middle school. It's one thing to do it in grade school, it's another thing even to do in high school. In middle school, you have to be careful with it, in my opinion, because what happens is you end up with boring, situationally boring classes. And you have to be really careful how you go about that. And I noticed that it's called out here a handful of times, and I just, report, testing, research-based data, you gotta be careful in middle school how you do that. And we can go back again to the whole, I mean, there are places it's fine to do it, but there's a lot of places where you shouldn't be doing it and shouldn't be messing with it. You should let that teacher go. Get those good teachers and let them go and engage those children in the work.
Well, isn't it called out more about more universal practices around formative assessment? Yeah.
We're wrestling with that as a district to try to alleviate that load.
Well, I know, I'm just warning us off it to some degree.
Well, off formative assessment?
No, I'm warning us off of overdoing things being research-based, because there's a lot of gray area there. It's being, doing a lot of data gathering to do your social studies class, and making sure Common Cores, and making sure you have reading across the curriculum, so you're doing, reading this leads to this, and like PE classes,
So you'll notice-
literacy across the curriculum.
You'll
all
notice some of
that,
the
a lot
research
of
in there.
I know, but a
Says
lot of the
be
research
creative.
is bogus, really, sorry. You know, it's bogus because they can't research it because everybody's doing it. So you can't go out and do it and go out again, go out and look it outside, and they ain't doing that necessarily, see? And they're very, very, very successful, but they're not doing that stuff. They're not research-based, looking at everything, database. They're doing some of it, but not this huge amount of it. They're not doing a huge amount of Common Core. It's fine, they're gonna, okay, fall through. But it's not, they're teaching children things that are good for those children to know, and they're engaging them in things that are good to engage them in. That doesn't mean that it's research-based, or that it's database, or that it's Common Core, or it's directed to the testing. That's just my opinion, and I think it's.
We've had this conversation. No, I hear you.
Yeah, I know you do, but we have a tendency to slip back into it all the time in our educational systems today, and it's one of the reasons that we have so many kids who can't read. And you don't enjoy
All right,
school.
anybody else?
So,
Anything?
sorry if I missed this, but what are the next steps? I mean, there's both in terms of the team, and if I did miss it, then you don't need to
Like
go
5
through it.
slides.
Okay, so never mind. Never mind,
And
please
they're
don't.
also kind of generalized
Yeah.
on the.
What do you need, what else do you need from us today? This was a hell of a lot of work.
I know, I mean,
Yeah.
I'd love to acknowledge too, but
Yeah.
it's a great
Yeah.
amount of work, and it's a great plan as a first step. And we know it's a first step, there's many things to work out.
So, I think, one of the key decision points is who's our candidate, and
Yeah.
I expressed that, so
Yeah.
that would be a next step. Also, but I think the next steps we're on,
Yes.
soliciting for the principals, getting them in place, finishing up the documents, in particular the manuals, the guides, so that we have kind of step-by-step implementation manuals, so to speak. So, I mean, so it would just be, that primary piece, I think.
And we're looking for principals experienced in middle schools.
I can
Yes.
speak to that.
Yes.
So, that would be
Good,
us.
thank you.
Just wanted to clarify.
I appreciate it. Chris, and that's a bold question. How many periods in the day are you presupposing here? 6, 7?
Okay, so if you look under scheduling, it has the concept of flexible scheduling, so minimally it would have to be 6. It could be any period schedule. A flexible schedule adapts to the needs of those children. So it could look a little bit different, have different period lengths, but at that range, yes. And especially if you want children like ELLs to get access to anything
Yeah.
other than ELL, you'll need to
Yeah.
think outside the box or.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of my big
And
concerns there.
right now, we
Okay.
still don't even have uniformity,
No, we don't.
We don't have what?
The-
Oh, uniform.
consistency, no.
Yeah. So we would just, the scheduling committee would kind of come up with some parameters on how to do a flexible schedule, and what are some ideas to optimize that exemplary state. So that's yet to be convened and produce that, well, it's been convened, but it's got to produce the work.
Did you take into account the technology in the cost thing?
I did, thank you. And again, it needs to be refined. Technology said was a good starting point. Of course, they want to kind of like outfit it, while they have a chance to get in there, outfit it well, so it's got some tenure to it. So we're working on those numbers.
If you move away from the framework piece and just talk about the work that's gone into thinking about implementation, I think the lesson learned is, from Ockley, is how much it really takes to plan it well. And I'm not talking about the framework now, I'm just talking about the implementation plan. And wherein I thought we want to get these schools open in 18, 19, that's the goal, but we're going to have to hustle to do it right. And I just need to say that. I want to say I really appreciate the amount of work that's gone into this. And I'm not sure where, Chris, in your document, it talks about the number of people that have been involved to date, but it's a significant number of people. And I would add that one of the things that Chris did today is he did present this to the PAT presidents. Any comments on your presentation?
It was a positive conversation, and of course, where their interest is where do we really get to say what this looks like, because we have expertise. And I said, in stage 2, often content specific but not exclusive to it, you'll be engaged, and that's where your expertise will manifest. And they saw that opportunity, but their second concern, and I think it'll line up with what our experiences at Ockley, is how are you going to make sure that we have furniture, that we have our books, that the rooms are clean, that the electricity works? How do you operationalize that? And we showed them the manuals. And I said, so you have all these materials, look at them and tell me if we've missed something. And comb through it and we also talked about what would be next steps with Ockley specifically, is going back and gathering input from the community, the teacher community, and both from the parents on their perspective on where we did not do well in implementation. So it was a positive conversation, very interested in where they got input, and then how to operationalize moves specifically.
Very similar to what we're doing when that was with commercial. The great community is working, friends of community, what we're doing.
Yeah, and we should memorialize that. I mean,
Yeah.
and we have a lot of talent and a lot of people with that information. It's just getting it all in one place and organizing it.
What hard to do first.
So, yeah. So let me just say something about budget. So obviously you realize it's going to cost money, okay? And I want to stress that. There are still some unknown costs. When we confirm feeders, there will be additional costs. As we tighten up and actually know numbers, there will be additional costs. They'll be on the facility side, and they will be on the soft side, or where you hire personnel, extended hours, those sort of things. There's some things we haven't thought of that will surface. The document is intended to be open and organic in that way. So just be aware that it's going to be a significant investment. What is not called out specifically, but will, prior to leaving, is one of those pieces as we move back into Ockley, to bring it up to this base level, to re-engage on some different items, what those costs would be as well. And it's not like a couple $100,000.
But it's for the next budget.
Well, some of it,
I'm assuming the stuff that you need is in this budget,
yeah, I mean, but some of the things we start now and we need to extend on now. The bulk of that cost, I mean, we haven't really triggered out, but if you look on the Gantt chart, you can see where there's a confluence of things.
A lot of good work, I appreciate it very much.
Yes, Trevor?
You know, one of the challenges that Chris had for the last presentation is he didn't want to bring to a full board meeting the overwhelming amount of work that had been done, and so as a result, what you got was a little thin, but what's behind it, as you can see, is pretty consequential.
I do have a question for Harry. Since, is there a place that we can put these documents for public viewing? Because I know that's one of the long-term plans, to kind of have that.
Within a week or so, we're going to have a website up that will be the repository for everything. If you want to know about the Tubman Roseway Heights Middle School, there's a website you go to that'll have everything on it.
Okay. Any questions come up, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to provide that information.